Oh, yeah.
She wants you to move.
This is a whole musical change.
Well, now they're from the other side.
Okay, one more.
2 exercise.
Set now.
Do you think we should make it a grand entrance?
I saved two and you didn't know.
Yes. 2 days.
2 days.
2 days up on the road.
How are you?
I was in South because you don't pick up the phone. No.
I need your TV.
Oh, yes. I know. March is It's cool. It's just a little sprinkle.
I thought that was so.
Get it to where you gotta get closer.
Thanks for the good wishes. Just remember. After we talked.
You
I
was
thought,
me.
oh, I know who that is. That's Audrey. But I couldn't understand.
I know.
I tell you, it's true with almost all women. Your pitch is just a little high for me and I don't hear you.
I know.
You give it to a guy and I can hear him fine. Anyway, it wasn't 5 minutes after. Like, oh, I know who that was. I had no idea when I saw it. Anyway, it's good to see you. Thank you for the call. Anyway, I love you. Anyway, you take care of yourself.
I didn't come here.
See you.
Well, that's okay. That's scary. I think he's busy anyway. I know he is. Okay. See you later.
It's been how many years? I know. I still miss.
Yeah. I saw Chevy now.
You did. Give her my love.
Together and catch up. Yeah, but
You know Joyce.
yeah,
Are you Joyce?
familiar.
No,
She's
no.
Joyce.
This is
Like you look familiar too.
You know, I know you.
What is your name?
Audrey Muir.
Oh, I've met you through Beth, but also through Sherry Weiner.
Right.
Oh, you too.
When Shelley.
Well, I think he has a positive phone. So I guess it's I think so. I know it. Yeah. You know what? I still tell him I love him. I love him. Even though I get mad at
You can join me in singing as I read this melody. Ya la la la, ya la la ya, ya la 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 la, ya la la ya ya la ya la ya Welcome. The season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. A time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for healing, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. Today we remember the life of Melvin Arnold Coffey, a man who in his 88 years touched many lives, inspired friends, family, and colleagues with his intelligence, his kindness, and his ability to overcome challenge. For his closest family, all of you here, this profound loss will change the rest of your lives. And today, as we gather to honor Mel, we also come together to offer you support, not just now, but in the weeks and months ahead, being here with you as you mourn and adjust and heal. Certainly that was what Mel would have wanted most. Over the recent weeks, Mel and I had several conversations as he was wrestling with what it meant to face his end. And wrestle he did, as was his way. This was a lifelong trait, I gather, wrestling with ideas, with meaning, bringing to bear a formidable intellect to figure out what it means to live honorably, to live kindly, to live courageously, to live well. These questions animated him till the very end. And in his life, he answered them not just by thinking them through, which he did with considerable intellectual vigor, but more important, by living those answers and questions in action with kindness, generosity, humor, and tenacity. I want to go back with all of you for a few moments and remember the milestones of Melvin Coffey's life. Mel was born in Chicago in 1934 and had 3 siblings, Stuart, George, and Tammy. His childhood years included great challenges. He suffered early tragedy when his mother died when he was only 9 years old. And he had a childhood case of polio, landing him in treatment with an iron lung. And I'm just gonna pause and remind everyone to please turn off your phones so we don't have distractions. So learning about all these early challenges made me wonder if his tenacity traces back to those times. He learned from a young age to face adversity by finding his strength and adapting in difficult circumstances. When he became blind, starting in his 30s, and then lost most of his hearing in his later years, he responded with the fortitude and resilience of a person who had already overcome great challenge. From his childhood years, Mel was always an avid student, skipping grades and building an educational foundation in both secular school and Jewish cheder. He later went to CU Boulder as an undergraduate and then NYU and DU, where he got a master's in taxation and his law degree. But Mel's learning cannot be adequately captured by these formal educational experiences alone. Mel loved learning in a way that continued through his whole life, studying Torah and Jewish ideas, reading about new developments in the legal world, attending classes for the blind, keeping up on current events and analysis. Mel's passion for learning and intellectual rigor were a part of his life till the very end. And his intellectual life was closely intertwined with his Jewish life. Ron showed me a painting in Mel's office, which tells that story. The painting shows a group of bearded men in traditional Jewish garb arguing animatedly over an open book. That tradition of argument for the sake of arriving at deeper truth lies at both the heart of Jewish thought and the legal profession, and Mel was very good at it. Mel was a free thinker and loved Judaism's legacy of questioning and argumentation. Yet as far as his thinking may have taken him theologically, he always valued Jewish community, practice, and culture. He even considered becoming a rabbi for a time. At home, he and his family always lit candles every Friday night to honor Shabbat. He belonged to 2 Jewish communities in Denver here, HEA, where we gather to remember him now, and B'nai Havurah, where I serve as the rabbi. Professionally, Mel was very successful. He practiced criminal and civil tax law for many years and saw himself as a fighter for the little guy. Not only did he frequently win for his clients, he also, down to the last case he ever took, he also gave back to the community, serving briefly in the US Army, working for a US attorney, teaching as an adjunct professor at DU, mentoring colleagues, and serving a term in the Colorado State Legislature. For these reasons and more, Mel made it onto the Marquee Who's Who listing in 2006 for his many accomplishments. Mel lived most of his life in Colorado, where his family relocated as he entered 8th grade. And there he found lifelong friends like Buddy Sunshine, who I think is in this room right now. In his youth, Mel joined the Jewish fraternity AZA and met his wife, Beverly, at a dance. They were married for 53 years until she passed in 2002. Together, they raised 2 children, Ron and Bobby, who blessed them with 3 grandchildren, Ellie, Zach, and Anna. In the last decade, Mel was blessed to find love again with Gloria Weiss, who has been a source of tremendous comfort, joy, and support. We will soon hear from several of these loved ones who can share more about their relationships with Melvin and their insights about who he was in their eyes. So I'm not going to tell you those stories myself. I'll let them speak for themselves. When I spoke to Mel in his final days, his number one concern was for Gloria and his kids and grandkids nieces, and just all of the loving family that have been a part of his life, the center of his life. I asked him what was most important, and that was it, making sure that all of you would be okay. Providing for you even after he was no longer with us in life. He loved you all so much. For a man who accomplished so much professionally and personally, it all came down to family. It all came down to love. That was what mattered most to him. That's where his most important legacy lies. And so now I'd like to give everyone a chance to hear from some of his family directly. And first I'd like to call Ron, Mel's son.
You know, it's times like these when we realize there's a lot of ways to talk about a person's life. I thought I talked about my dad's legacy. I don't mean that in the abstract either. There are two things that he did in his life that touched every single person in this room in a very real and tangible way. Perhaps after you've heard about this, I don't know, many of you may not know this, you know, each time you engage in these activities, you realize there's a big piece of my dad. Dad served in the legislature in 1968, 1969, and at that point, he'd been an experienced tax lawyer and understood how tax laws impacted real people. And, you know, he had a name for that. He called them his clients. For many years prior to his service in the legislature, the Colorado income tax form was very much like the federal return. You started with how much you made and all your deductions, went through the whole thing. Dad realized there was a better way. And as part of his service in the legislature, introduced what appears to be a very small change to the Colorado tax law, that now you start your Colorado tax return with your federal adjusted gross income, making the Colorado income tax form pretty much able to fit on a postcard now, except you have all the voluntary deductions. And of course, that did a couple of things. It made it easier for all of us to do our taxes. And interestingly enough, it brought in more money to the state. So now, every time you fill out your Colorado tax form and you start with your federal adjusted gross income, you think of Mel Coffee. Because that's one of the things that he personally accomplished. The second legacy that many of you may not be aware of is the light rail. And I mean that very literally. Without my dad, we would not have the light rail. He represented a very large construction contractor that at the time was using materials to build buildings. And Dad realized that there was a gap in the law that allowed for large contractors to not have to pay tax on RTD tax on the materials that they used in buildings. Needless to say, the state of Colorado did not appreciate that gap. And after many, many years of litigation, my dad finally got his chance to argue a case in the Colorado Supreme Court. So as you might imagine, he was obsessed with every small detail of that litigation. And so one of the things he did was send me out to the legislative counsel's office to go find out what, in fact, was the history of this. Was this a mistake or was this intentional? And after a few days down there, we actually found that Dad was right. there was a very intentional gap in the law. So when the day for oral argument came, he was standing 6 foot tall and ready for battle. He had a lot of tough questions and really came through it very well. As we waited for the decision to come down, we finally got it, and we lost. It was unbelievable. I actually went back and read the case yesterday because I had remembered that we'd always just said, taxes is taxes and we all gotta pay. So disappointing loss. Then a few months later, there's an article in the Rocky Mountain News. Turns out RTD had a lot of extra money they weren't counting on as a result of this case. And were able to take that money and apply it to a federal matching grant for the very first leg of the light rail out to 5 Points. And the rest is history. So now, when you ride on the light rail, and by the way, I don't know, many years ago, I tried to find a picture. The light rail actually had MAC on the side, which gave me many, many opportunities to poke my dad about his train. So when you ride the light rail, you think of Mel. So in closing, I just want to leave you with, one of his favorite sayings of late. Just remember, it's not what you don't have, it's what you have.
I'd like to call up Gloria.
First of all, I want you to know that my second son, Al, said he will pull all the plugs and turn off all the lights that they've been leaving on if I walk with my walk. Go to the microphone. I met Melvin Arnold Coffey years and years and years ago with my brother Arnie and Sandra Keller, because Sandra was the sister of Mel's beloved wife that I love dearly, Beverly Coffey. And so I love Bev, and I brought them a few meals when she was sick. And so a while after she passed away, many years later, a few years later, I got a call from Mel. And he said, Gloria, I'd like to take you to dinner. You brought so many meals. And I said, no, thank you. It's fine. It's not necessary. And so he said, no, I really want to take you to dinner. I said, really, Mel? It's not necessary. So, I mean, I love Mel as a family member, as a respected member. He was always the wisdom with my brother at the holiday dinners. And I just wasn't romantically interested in him. And so, thank you. I'll get back to you later. Anyway, so he said, come on, let's go to dinner. But of course you have to drive. Now, those of you that know Mel is blind and hard of hearing. And I said, that's fine. I said, can we just go to Yanni's, which is in our neighborhood, or his neighborhood. And he said, of course. So we walked over to Yanni's, and it was a Saturday night, and it was very busy. And she said, I can't he said, I can't put you in a quiet place. It's noisy here. And so I said, Mel, after we drank a little bit of ouzo, he said, I said, let's go to a different restaurant. He said, fine. So we went to Jean's, which is a lovely Asian restaurant in the Landmark area. We had a beautiful dinner. It was delicious. And he leaned over across the table and he said, I don't want you to think I'm being forward, but would you mind coming back up to my place after we're through eating, and I'll tell me what we talked about, because I couldn't hear you. How can I say that? So we went up to his place. He said, we'll have some tea. And he said, I probably will never marry again, but I really enjoy your company and I'd like to date you. And I said, but Mel, we're family. And he said, but we're not blood related. So I said, okay. So we dated for a while, and he seemed to be wanting to be a little more romantic. And I still wasn't feeling the romance. So I said, Mel, maybe we should break up a little bit. And he said, okay. So we broke up for a while, and he even went out of state. Somebody fixed him up with a relative. And he came back, and he had dated other people. And I mean, Mel is this phenomenal individual. He was gracious and fun and brilliant and kind and loving. And, you know, he's just a miraculous man and as strong as an ox. And so he came back and he called me again. And he said, Gloria, come on, let's really try. So for a year and a half, I put my arm around his shoulder, gave him a hug, kissed him on the cheek, and that was a year and a half that I really got to know the true Melvin Coffey. And I fell deeply in love with this man. And I've never met a more amazing, handsome, gorgeous, wonderful, loving, brilliant, kind, sweet individual in my life. And I'm so thankful he had the stick-to-itiveness that he did. And once I was at Arnie and Sandra's, I had hammer toe surgery and I was staying with them. And he sent me the most beautiful bouquet of long stem red roses that I'd ever seen in my life. They were huge. And so I went over to the phone and I started to call him. I had Beth's phone number. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm calling Mel to thank him for the roses. She said, are you interested in them? I said, no, at that time. And she said, well, he's going to think you're going to be interested. I said, I want to call him and thank him. She said, send him a thank you note. I said, no, I am going to call Mel. So I called Mel. But he's been this amazing individual. He has his priorities. He had everything he had to get done on time. He had to care for everybody. He loved politics. He loved hearing the other side. He was open to anybody and everyone of all walks of life. And I am so thankful to have him be so persistent and for us to get together. And I've enjoyed and loved being in his new family. And I am just totally blessed, and everyone has been so kind and loving to me. and I see Bob, Silver, and Gail there. And Bob he was here with the Alliance and went and took Mel to services every Saturday. And now Bob and Gail moved up to over 55 area, 160th exit. And we haven't seen them as much, and Bob and Gail are in their 60s, I believe. No. And what?
Just turned 70.
Just turned 70. But it's been a long time. And Mel's 88. Mel was 80. He still is 88. But they developed a friendship that was just incredible. And they would discuss politics. And the age didn't matter, the difference. But thank you, Bob and Gail, for taking all the time. And his friend, Buddy Sunshine, who wanted to even see Mel so much these last month or so. And Mel loves you to the nth degree, has always loved you to the nth degree. They went on each other's honeymoons together. It goes back to high school. He enjoys and Bev and Mel. And they've been friends forever. But because Mel was not up to his par, he didn't want you to see him in that state. And I asked him many times, let's call Buddy. And he said, no, I'm sorry. And Bobby, he loved Eddie. And you, I see you there. And just thank Rhoda. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And when I saw Bob Rashke and Margie, thank you. I just cried and cried and cried. He loved you guys. And thank you, Linda, for coming. And David, thank you. And Linda, thank you. Everyone, thank you. Oh, I had a call from Larry and Judy Kaufman. And they said, please read this at the ceremony. Dearest family, we vacillate in one moment, choosing to live in the shadow of our mortality. In another moment, choosing to live in the light of our eternity. We meet each other, my beloveds, again and again, where our lights touch. Timelessly and boundlessly, we love all of you. Judy, Larry, Rory, Bill, and the invisible beloveds. And they are first cousins of Mel's, who could not be here today.
I'd like now to call up Zach, Mel's grandson.
I just wanted to share a couple of stories, the way Mel or Zadie, as I called him, had an impact on me in my life. Couple funny stories, a couple serious, just how I've been processing the last couple of days. So I was about 5 or 6, I couldn't have been older than that. And the first gift I remember Zadie giving me, you can think about a guess maybe, but you won't get it right, was the first volume of the Colorado Revised Statutes. Obviously, very meaningful. I thought I'd read an excerpt. No, I'm just kidding. But at that age, like I think as a kid, getting like an adult gift like that, even though you can't read a whole sentence of it, was still really meaningful to me. And Libby and Zadie, when I was with them, at that age and growing up, I never felt like a kid with them, and then that was always really special to me. Growing up, as Zadie and I would have more, mature related conversations. The next lesson I really remember the second my mind was being grateful for what you have, not what you don't have, which my dad also recalled and why I should have spoken first, but that's okay. But I think in that just simple but really powerful lesson, and when there's difficult times in my life, something I still think about is really timeless advice. Then as I grew up a little bit more, started going to college, started looking for jobs in the real world. I remember him telling me about balance. He would tell me this word on the phone during summers when I'd see him. And I think to me this meant a lot of things. Not overextending yourself at school, making time, for yourself, for your friends, and for your classes. Keeping control of emotions, not overreacting to situations, trying to stay measured even when maybe it's an emotional time. Being open-minded about new ideas, new experiences, what other people are telling you might disagree with. Things you've heard a lot already from, I think, everyone who's spoken. And finally, maybe most importantly, if you're eating desserts and it has fruit in it, it's actually good for you. The important one I definitely still think about at least once a week. My whole life, I remember Zadie that I can remember. He couldn't really see at all, and it was pretty hard of hearing. But I don't think I know anyone who saw the world with more clarity. And my dad talked a lot about his very physical legacy, and for me, I'll always remember some of those timeless lessons. And obviously a lot of sadness that I won't have an opportunity to hear anything else. As I continue to grow up, and I still feel very much that way. But I really think about those lessons, and that to me is his legacy in my life. Thank you.
So now I'd like to call up Mel's daughter, Bobby Sue.
I'm going to try to wrap this up. So I do want to read something that's meant for so many of you. Here, and you. I do greatly love my family, all of them, each and every one. Family, extended family. I feel at peace that they have been exposed to standards and values of life that have blessed and guided me, and hopefully will guide them during their lifetime. That's a message from Dad. My father and I were very close. We shared thoughts, experiences, and adventures. However, the unique thing about our father-daughter relationship are the feelings that we had. We had a deep soul connection, a feeling like we've lived 1,000 lifetimes together. As a matter of fact, we're looking at those houses in 1970 we visited our house on Dahlia Street. And my mother said, well, how do you like it, Bobby? And I said, this is fine for Daddy and I, but where are you and Ron gonna live? And so now I'm going to tell you some little funny things here and there. Well, first of all, a very impressive event that happened in my life with my father. We went to Washington, D.C. several times. And during one of those trips, it didn't matter. Dad wanted to go to the Jefferson Memorial. And it didn't matter if it was day or night because he couldn't see. So we went at night. And we went, and I stood there with him, and I was looking at the writing on the wall that Jefferson had, all of his different things. And Dad said, what direction are we facing? And I'm looking at all these walls thinking, I don't know. Let me smell for the Potomac. I don't know. Anyways, so he said, okay, this is how we're going to do this. Read the first line on a wall. And I would start to read the line, and he finished that whole thing. And then he would say, now turn to the next wall and start that line for me. He had everything memorized, absolutely memorized. When I said to him one time in high school, if you could have been a person in history, who is it that you would have been? He said Thomas Jefferson. So that's a little about him. So Zach, you stole something from me. Dad loved dessert. So just thought I'd say that. Here's some Melisms and some thoughts about dessert. So yes, Dad would say fruit pie is really just fruit. So as Dad was losing his eyesight, he could only see just a little bit. And it would come down, he had retinitis pigmentosa, so it went from the outside in. So he saw a little tiny piece. So keep that in mind in this story. So my mom asked my husband, Dan, would you like a piece of cake? And Dad said, we have cake? Where is it? Mom said, on the top of the refrigerator. He replied, that's not fair because I can't see it up there. On a cruise ship, the family was at dinner and my mother was reading the menu and she said to him, Mel, they have diet cheesecake. And with no pause at all, he said, well, good for you. My mother-in-law, Helga, is a fantastic baker. She would often send cake to my father, and one day he calls up Helga to thank her for her apple crumb cake and tells her how much he enjoyed it and how delicious it was. There's only one problem, he continues. They're diminishing cakes. He often said to Dan, if your mom just wants to make me a cake, I would be happy to partake. I often help my dad with paperwork and organizing, and one day I said, Dad, really, do I need to clean all of this up? I'm really too tired right now. Of course, he couldn't see it. But he would say, well, when I'm gone, it's going to be your problem. And he said that a lot. That's going to be your problem. So the other thing is, Dad wanted so badly to learn about his blindness. I worked for him many years in his law firm, and I put in front of him a brochure for seeing eye dog. And indeed, Dad enjoyed many years of two very special seeing eye dogs. But he enjoyed the Center for the Blind. He joined the senior discussion group, learned to use his iPhone, special softwares in it, and he did very well with that. He learned how to use a cane, and he went on a program where they teach students how to be independent, how to use a washing machine, do their laundry, cook for themselves, take the bus and the light rail by themselves. So I picked him up from that, and he says to me, Bobby, I learned how to fold laundry And I said, oh, that's wonderful. And he said, it is, because when you unpack for me, it'll all be good for you. So what do? I start, I unzip it, and sure enough, perfectly folded clothes on top. And I start putting them into drawers, and I come in there, then there's this big plastic mound. So I said, Dad, what's in the plastic bag? Your dirties? He said, no, everything's clean. I said, you have clean clothes in this bag all crunched up? And he said, yeah, honey, I got tired of folding. So, by the way, I want to expand on that mantra because there's one sentence we've missed. It was, it's not what you can't do, it's what you can do. It's not what you don't have, it's what you do have that counts. The other thing he would say is, and I'm not kidding. And for Zach, Ellie, and Anna, Grandpa has something to tell you. We're here because we're here, because we're here. That's a little personal joke. Because my father would sing it whenever we got to a destination. I want to thank you all for coming and for listening to us and for respecting my father and being here for him. Thank you.
So now we turn to the words of the 23rd Psalm, which is a piece of liturgy that's accompanied our people in moments like this for countless generations. Mismo le Davi, Adonai Roni Oexon, V'inat Hashem Yavitzeni, Alei Menuchot Yenaleni. Nafshi esholeh, nafshi esholeh, ya'ateni b'madei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech beged zamavet, lo yara ki ata imati. Shivtecha, Mishantecha, Emayen Alhamoni, Tamru lefanai shulchan, Tarok lefanai shulchan, Tarok lefanai shulchan, neged zorah, Tishanta Hashem Eloshi, Tishanta Hashem Eloshi, Tishanta Hashem Eloshi, Kol Sirei Maya. Near for me, Goyim Beshavti bevet Adonai. Beshavti bevet Adonai. Leor Yamim. Ya la la ya ya ya. Ya la la ya ya. Now we turn to the words written by Rabbi Jack Reamer and Sylvia Kamens, and I forgot to distribute these, so I'm just going to tell you what. You'll have a line which is "We remember them," okay? And I'll just gesture, and that's when you say that, okay? At the rising of the sun and at its going down, we remember. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, at the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, at the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, at the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, at the beginning of the year and when it ends, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joy we crave to share, when we have decisions that are difficult to make, when we have achievements that are based on theirs. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. Please rise, and we give our attention to Cantor Cantor. For the traditional El Malay Rachamim prayer.
For Malay, I was just feeling inspired by the words that the psalmist writes in the Song of Ascents. When the psalmist writes that upon the return to Zion, we were like dreamers, and hearing stories like dreaming of what's possible with tax law to simplify people's lives, and dreaming of what's possible in a public transportation system, and dreaming about how to bring joy to each other's lives. We can be like dreamers to be like Melvin. And in the same song, we hear that those who sow in tears will reap in joy. And sometimes we feel a long removal between that tear phase, between the initial loss and when the joy starts to kick in. Today we've heard a lot of beautiful stories about fruitcake and folding laundry, and we already start to feel some of that joy. But it's not going to be a linear process, and it's okay for the tears to come back in and for us to continue having to sow. So before MLA, in order to sing that Song of Ascents. שיבת ציון היינו כחולים, אז ימלא צפוני לשוני. המצאנו חלפונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת משה בן חיים וחיה שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן מנוחתו אבל רחמים, אז תראו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר אמן. El Male Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Melvin Arnold Coffey, Moshe Ben Chaim Bechaya, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
You may be seated. So thank you again for being here this afternoon. I want to just make a few announcements and then I'll call Jim in to make a few more. So if you'd like to make a donation in Mel's honor, the family is asking that you direct those gifts to one of a few places: the Colorado Center for the Blind, or Guiding Eyes for the Blind, B'nai Havara, or HEA. All of those places are certainly meaningful, have been meaningful in his life. In just a moment, Jim is going to give us more information and detail about what's coming immediately after the service in terms of burial. And for Shiva, the family will be sitting tonight, tomorrow, and Wednesday night, 6 to 8:30, with the service starting around 7 o'clock each night. That'll be in the Landmark East building, and on the ground floor. And now I'd like to call forward Jim. And there he is over there. And please do remember, after we're done with our final service elements, that we're going to allow the family to exit first so that they can make their way, and you'll have a chance to greet them and so on at the ship.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our service here at the Hebrew Educational Alliance. We do have an interment at Mount Eagle Cemetery. As you may be able to hear, we are experiencing rain here, but talking with the cemetery representative, they have light rain off and on. So we are going to take our chances to go ahead and get out there. They're not experiencing any thunder, and the most important is they are not experiencing any lightning. So we are going to go forward with the interment now. We will ask everyone to rise in just a minute, remain in your places as we escort the casket and the family to their cars. If you happen to run into them in the restroom or grabbing their coats in the small chapel, please allow them to do what they need to do and get themselves together out to their car. Please don't delay them and just wait to hold on your condolences until you can see them at the landmark. We'd like to invite the pallbearers forward and ask everyone to rise at this time.